All right. Let's see here. Okay, so a little something different this time. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I use AI to help me with my blog, my creative content. Now, first off, I don't use AI to write posts for me or write videos for me. Don't do that. Write your own content, and that's what I do. But there are a number of ways that you can use AI to assist you in creating that content. Um, and I just wanted to walk through some of the things that I do that help me. So one of the first things is, I've got my blog. It's a Hugo Static website. Um, and it used to run on Gatsby, and I used I used Copilot to help me, migrate it from Gatsby to Hugo, and that's one of the first things that I did. It was actually one of my first experiments with AI and using tools like Copilot and Claude. And it turned out pretty well, I think. Got most of it in pretty good shape. There were a number of things that I had to go back and touch up and fix, but for the most part, it worked really well. Um, so I did use it for that. But I wanted to go through and kind of talk through how I use AI for the other pieces of my blog, and how I create my content and my workflow in general. So one of the first things that I do or that I've done is to go through and have it review uh, my existing uh, blog. It had gotten to the point, and all over the years of writing things, I've been inconsistent with tags, with categories, with how I name things. I might use, dot net, or I might use .net net as the tag for .net. C sharp might be C sharp, it might be C dash sharp, it might be C hashtag. Um, all the different ways that you can write .net. Power Automate might be two words. It might be one word together. It might be Power Dash Automate. There were just a lot of things that I did that where I was really inconsistent in how I was tagging my various posts. So one of the first things I did is I had to go through and show you the log here. This one. All right. All right. Why struggling here now? There we go. Took it a minute to load in the context. So one of the things I did is I went through. I said, review the tags on all my blog posts and look for inconsistencies, misspellings, and tags that might be merged together. So it went through and it searched through my blog, and it came up with a bunch of different things that it split up into various categories. First, case inconsistencies. I've got lowercase AI, uppercase AI. Capitalized Copilot here, capitalized Function Friday, and so on and so forth. Where I was inconsistent in how I was tagging things, from a case standpoint. Um, I went through and fixed all those. And next thing is inconsistencies in formatting. C dash sharp, C without, or C sharp, without a dash. Same thing with EF Core, soft skills, Power Automate. You can see I was really getting inconsistent in how I was, using these tags, and so it makes it harder for you to link posts together if you're not using the exact same tag on those posts. Somebody would click something that said Power Dash Automate, they wouldn't see any of the posts that say Power Automate, and so on and so forth. And then things were suggestions for, candidates for merging things together, job hunt, job dash search, new dash job. So, again, I was being really inconsistent in how I was tagging various posts related to, various job searches over the years to, getting involved in job hunting in general. Things like mentoring versus mentorship, extension members, and just things like that where I wasn't consistent in how I did it. So AI has been really good finding those kinds of things and saying, hey, you need to fix these so that you're consistent in how you're doing things and how you group things together on your content. Another thing that went through is look through misspellings. I constantly misspell Mastodon. I always use this A in the middle, and it's supposed to be an O. Um, I do it over and over and over again. I think it found like 40 different times where I'd misspelled Mastodon, not just in tags, but also in the content of the blog post and whatnot. Um, so that's another thing that was great for finding. Again, ambiguous tags, odd tags, things. For instance, I've been on Taylor Desson was a recruiter. He's now kind of like a big wig VP with Ronstadt and Torque, and he has a podcast that he does called Guidance Counselor 2.0, where he talks to people about job hunts, about the industries, about the tech industry, and about things like that. I've been on his show a couple times over the years, just talking various things. And obviously one time I had tagged it GC 2.0, and the other time I had tagged a post Guidance Counselor 2.0, things like that. And it's likely the same podcast series could be merged together. So I went through and I fixed all those things on my post and put those fixes out a couple days ago. So AI is fantastic at that kind of stuff and helping you to find um, the various things that where you've got those inconsistencies, your misspellings, your formatting issues, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the first ways that I've used AI to help me uh, improve my content. Another time, sometimes you get a mental block. You're like, I don't know what to write about this week. I need some ideas. So another thing you can do is you can come in here and uh, say, hey, look at my blog and suggest things that I might write about. And I've used this a couple of times to come up with ideas of stuff to write about. In fact, my newest post here, not the newest post, this one, the value of immutability in .NET. I just, that one was an idea that came from one of these suggestions. Not this list, but when I'd asked previously, so, like, I don't know what to write about this week, suggest some ideas based on my content. So I go in here, I say, review my blog and suggest ideas for a new blog post. Um, and so it'll go and it'll think for a little while. I ran this one this morning and it came up with a couple ideas, you know, so here's some ideas, um, I've written a lot about .NET recently, so I said, okay, here's some ideas. You could write about what's new in C# 14. You do compare contrast of fast endpoints versus minimal APIs. I wrote a post last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, of what was new in EF Core at the time. It's like maybe it's time for a refresher on that. Various testing things, some ideas, things I might write about Aspire. That's something I've written about 9 times. Power Automate, I've written about 111 times. It's not a whole lot lately. I need to get back on some of that stuff. So, but it's suggesting things. What actually works. What with the Function Friday thing I was doing for a while. Just various things that it suggests based on content that you've already written about. Here's ideas of how you might enhance that or how you might expand upon that. Or here's an idea for next part in a series that of things that you've already written about a few times. So it's great for coming up with some of those ideas when you just don't know what to write about, and it bases off of content that you've already written. um, so that's kind of the second idea, and I've done this a couple times now where I've come up with things. Another thing is when I create a blog post, uh, sometimes it's inspired by things that I've written about or things that I've experienced, working with client applications. And obviously, I can't share code from my clients. I can't, use that code as examples. So, what AI is really good at is creating little snippets of code to fit into your post. For instance, here's this one that I made this API a couple of weeks ago to help me with posting to social media because the way I was doing it with Power Automate in the past wasn't really working great. There are things that Power Automate does really well, a lot of stuff where you have to kind of build content to go into a blog post like I was doing there doesn't work really well in Power Automate. So I thought, okay, I'm going to create an API and I'm going to do it so it'll post to the 3 social media platforms that I work with, which is Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn. Um, and I'm going to write it in .NET. And I started that out. I kind of created the outline of it. I thought, well, okay, this might be a great experiment for a code companion, a coding agent, to see if it can do that. Because there's a lot of details in how you need to connect to, get your auth tokens, the various steps to putting together a post. Obviously, fitting it to the size, max size that you can put in a social media post, and that varies between the 3 platforms. Because Mastodon, you've got like 300 characters, or sorry, Blue Sky, you have like 300 characters. Mastodon, you have like 500 characters. LinkedIn, there really isn't a limit on characters in a post. And coming up with an API that can take one block of content and parse it out correctly for all 3 of the platforms and post it out. But not is something that .NET would really excel at. So, uh, okay, well let's let AI write it, and I let I use SpecKit, GitHub SpecKit to do most of the work. Um, and I made some changes and additions and corrections to it, but I wrote a blog post about it. But I didn't, as you look here at the blog post, it's all text, it's all content, and there's no code snippets to that. So I thought, okay, what if what can I have AI suggest as far as code snippets go? So I come in here and it says, review the blog post here and suggest code samples to improve the post. And this is something that the AI, Claude and Copilot both do really well. Um, so, for instance, here for my API/social posts, you know, here's an example that I might include of how to call that and pass in a payload. Um, and show some changes, additions to that, just various things, and coming up with these code snippets. It's really excellent at that kind of stuff, where it can put that in, um, and you can take it or leave it. You can change it, but it saves you a lot of effort because you don't want to have to write an entire application just to get a couple snippets out of it. So just use AI and say, hey, look at this, come up with some code snippets and do that. So for instance, if you look at my newest post, my EF Core global query filters post, um, this all these code snippets were generated by Claude. I didn't write any of these myself. I had to correct some things that it got wrong. For instance, like down here, it missed the await tag on the async calls, on both of them actually. Um, just various little things like that. Sometimes it was inconsistent in the snippets. I think like one, like up here, for instance, it was did a sorry, a date time deleted at format, but then when it created a snippet for another step down here, it did it as a Boolean. So it wasn't always consistent, as far as the snippets that it would generate. So you do have to review it, and you have to make sure that everything works well. But it took, I wrote all the text, and I said, okay, here's all the various things, various pieces, come up with some code snippets to match that, and it did a pretty good job of that. So that's another place where AI can be really useful in assisting you with coding, or with creating content for your social, for your blogs, for your videos, whatever it might be. Um, so I've talked about that. The last thing that I kind of use AI for quite a bit is as like an editor, proofreader. I say, look at a blog post. Here's the final draft. Here's my draft. Look at content that's there and suggest areas for improvement. So, for instance, I have posts that I did here. There we go. So here's a post that I did back in 2024, and obviously that was long before I was using AI for anything. And it's about Power Automate and using Power Automate to post messages into a Teams channel. Um, You can see there's a lot of screenshots, there's a lot of steps, and there's a lot of stuff that I included in it. But at the time, I wasn't using AI. I would proofread it and I would look over it, but there are obviously things that I missed. I say, okay, go back, look at this, suggest areas for improvement or correction. And then it comes up with all kinds of things to help you improve the quality of your content. So, for instance, breaks it down here: typos and grammar. I've got a number of typos and word choices that were kind of odd or different, and you can look through that and compare it. So like up here, you login credentials wherever that's at. And obviously, as I was proofreading it through it, I never noticed that wherever that's at. I'm looking for it here. But anyway, so there's a number of things, selecting instead of selecting, and so on and so forth. Um, Technical accuracy, it says, okay, the description is contradictory, and I didn't notice that at the time when I proofread it myself. So I've kind of been slowly going through some of my older content and having AI do some proofreading and suggesting changes and fixes. Um, how I can improve that kind of stuff, and that and it's not just for my benefit. Obviously, if I have a typo, or my wording is weird in some way and I didn't notice it at the time, there are still people who go back and look at these posts, look for this content, and whether it's 2 years ago, like this post, or something I wrote 5 years ago, or something I wrote last week. I want that content to be accurate. I want it to be effective. I want it to not. I want to present my knowledge in a way that's understandable to you as a user and as a viewer and reader. So by using AI to be my editor, to be my proofreader, because obviously I do this for free. I can't afford to pay somebody to do it. And it's always good to have a second set of eyes, even if that second set of eyes is AI. Kind of look at that content and say, hey, here's some things you might do a little bit differently or might do a little bit better. And like I say, you can take and leave each of the suggestions. Some of them are good suggestions, some are great suggestions, some of them are terrible suggestions. That's the way AI is. Um, but I, I, by doing that, it improves not just for me, but improves for you as well. So I will continue to work through with that and continue to improve my content. I'm never going to have AI write the content for me. That's just it's wrong. I mean, there, you read stories about people who are about these authors that are writing a book a day using AI. You actually read the book that they created, you can tell what kind of crap it is. Um, I don't know how stuff like that gets out there in the world. People take advantage of it. They find enough gullible people to actually consume that content, that it's worth their while to keep doing it. So hopefully that changes and things get better, but we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, use AI for what it does well, because it does do some things well. Uh, but being creative, being original, doesn't do that. So hopefully this helps you, and if you're a content creator and you can see positive ways this to take advantage of AI, then hopefully it's of benefit to you as well.